Sunny Arizona. We're in the backyard here of Layne's Airbnb. We even got that plane going over top.
It's my private plane.
It's your private jet landing?
Ballin'.
That hustle. Guys, this has kind of been a long time in the making. Layne and I have known each other since 2009, and he's actually helped pretty much prepped with you for all of 2010 and 11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
when you won your pro card, then your first pro show, yeah.
And I probably the best I ever looked on stage. Layne got me dialed in at the junior nationals. This is a long time ago, but it was probably where I got my pro card, probably the best I ever looked. And getting back on stage here in a couple of weeks, I'm having Layne again. I felt like I could have done my diet, but when you have someone like Layne with his expertise, I rely on how he's that other set of eyes, how I'm looking. I can talk to him about what I'm feeling, and I know it's somebody who's worked with me before, and I feel confident in that, and then also knows what he's doing. Having somebody in your corner doing that. So we've started working the last 8 weeks together, sending updates, trying to, again, this for me, this prep is about having fun. It's the goal that I set forth in 2016 for 2017 to get back on stage. And I'm not looking to, make my life competing. I'm not looking to even get back on at the Olympia. I'm not saying if I am or if I'm not, but it's not my goal necessarily. If I don't do it, it's not a big deal. That being said, I want to give my best and really try to come in. It's that you versus you mentality where I want to step on stage better than I was 2.5 years ago. And I think I'm doing that largely in part because I fully 100% trust Layne. And I'm, for the first time in 2.5 years, I'm flexible dieting to a point to where I feel like I'm healthy mentally.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the key in when you're trying to prep is you can, it's always about, looking good and everything, but you want to maintain a sense of health as well. It's not healthy to get down to 4% body fat or 5% body fat. You're not meant to stay there.
And even if you do it right, you're going to feel terrible at certain points.
And that's kind of a, that's something that, it's about pushing your body. I made a Instagram post today about, it's about pushing your body to a limit, just like an actor would. Christian Bale getting ready for the role where he got down like 128 pounds.
Yeah.
Crazy, and also you have, extreme like boxers, they're cutting weight for a fight. They go to like a camp in New Mexico and they just shut down. And you do that almost a little bit for a bodybuilding show. And I'm not going to say, it's a selfish thing. Because your life becomes all about you. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're training. It takes precedence, and to minimize any other distractions or stresses, having somebody like Layne who knows to say, "Hey, yeah, Steve, you're just flat. We need to have a high carb day, or you need to push harder this week." That is what's key.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people who are coaches that can do this sort of thing, and I think having an actual background in nutrition, that was important for you, for a coach to hire. But then also, like you said, the real value is just having somebody who's objective, who's not emotionally invested in the outcome.
Exactly.
Because we've had this many times where your inclination is, let's cut harder, and that's mine too. Like when I diet, I'm my worst client, because I'll do all kinds of stuff that I never would do with clients. And so just having an objective eye to say, you know what, let's hold off, let's see how this next few days goes, that sort of thing. And when you take it out of your own hands, I think that, it gives you a sense of peace in that, okay, I just got to do what's set out here, and if I do the point A, point B, point C, I'm going to get to where I want to go. Whereas if you're on your own, you'll second guess every single thing you do. Yeah,
and that's really actually that's what I love about counting macros too. Is so I've prepped the last 2 years. I've prepped and not counted macros. It's been more just on, hey, eat this at this time, this, and it was so hard for me because coming from the little science background, being a psychology major, I like breaking things down. I like being able to see things and see, okay, if I do X and Y, I can expect Z to happen. Right. And I think that having that in the whole fitness industry, you injected that scientific method pretty much into systematically getting leaner.
Well, and I think one of the things I did was I wasn't afraid to question dogma and status quo.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of resistance over the years from people who said, this will never work, or don't do this, And I've always just said, people will say, well, this is how it's been done. I'd say, okay, well, why?
Yeah.
Why? And when I did my research, it was always, questioning why. I never would take things at face value. And I think that's I heard something from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he said the job of any scientist is to question even those beliefs that we hold most fundamentally true, right? And so when I came into this industry, it was, you can't, if you want to get shredded, you can't eat quote unquote bad foods.
Right.
You know, you can't have any sugar. You know, you got to stay away from fat. You know, these sorts of things. You can only eat, you know, this short list of foods: chicken, steak, fish,
tilapia,
rice, broccoli. You know, those sorts of things. And I started, you know, digging through the research literature, and I was like, oh, that's not what the literature says.
Right.
You know, and you know, for example, is sugar.
Yep.
Like I love to give this example because people get their mind blown by it. Now, you know, sugar has been associated with a rise in obesity, and people look at even though, although last 10 years, sugar intake has gone down, and obesity has continued to go up, right? But people look at sugar and they're like, oh, you can't do that on a contest prep.
Right.
Well, I've seen plenty of people get shredded eating sugar. What's funny is they'll say you can't have Skittles or you can't have like something sugary, but then they'll take dextrose post-workout. Well, somehow that's different.
Right.
But I'm getting sidetracked. The point being, if you look at the literature where they actually compare sugar, high sugar intakes versus low sugar intakes, but they match calories.
Yes.
Okay. There's no difference in fat loss, and there's actually no difference in health markers. Okay. There was actually a study done by Serwit, and they looked at like over 100 grams of sugar per day versus like 10, where calories were matched.
Right.
They showed no difference in fat loss, no difference in inflammatory markers, no difference in blood lipids, a very, very small difference in cholesterol, like a 5% difference. And it was probably because the low sugar group was getting more fiber, because fiber will lower cholesterol. So, but if you equate protein, calories, and fiber, sugar doesn't seem to make a difference. Now, that being said, the downside to eating sugar is it's not very filling.
Right.
Right?
So you're going to be hungry faster.
Exactly.
And on a prep, that's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. So flexible dieting, the great thing about counting macros and flexible dieting is it's self-regulated.
Yes.
If you're on lower calories, you're going to select by default more good filling foods, right? So a good example of this is my friend Sohee Lee, who I do Physique Science podcast with. Sohee did a prep where she wanted to prove a point. So she ate a Snickers bar every day, right? So she fit it into a macro. She ate a Snickers bar every day. Well, Snickers bar is not very big, right?
No, it's not.
It's like this.
It's calorically dense.
Right? And it's 230 calories. It's like 30 grams of carbs and 10 grams of fat, something around those numbers. And people say, oh, that's so great that you can fit it in. And she said, you know, by a week gone by, I didn't even like eating it because it took up so much of my calories and it wasn't very filling.
Right.
It's like, I would have rather had a salad.
Exactly.
You know? And so that's the point. But the point being is that every once in a while, if you want to have that, if you want to fit something in, it's not going to hurt your
You're not
progress.
beating yourself up mentally.
Exactly. And that's when you tell people, eat these foods, not these foods.
So true.
The mental block it creates, and especially with women, who probably because they've been told they should diet from young ages.
Yep.
You know, the pressure society places on them. That it's not just, you know, they have a Snickers bar or a little bit of ice cream or something like that. There's no regulation whatsoever. We call it actually, the scientific term is disinhibition. Okay. And there's actually a study done by Westenhofer, really classic study. And they looked at, they brought people in, and I think it was cookies. Okay, so they had cookies out. They had people who followed a flexible dieting model versus a restrictive dieting model.
Gotcha.
Right, where you're cutting out certain foods. And they said, I believe the way they designed it was, you had to eat at least one cookie. It could have been donuts or something. It was something bad, right? You didn't have to eat more than one, but you had to eat at least one. And they looked at the behavior. And what they found was the people who followed a restrictive dieting model had more incidents of binge eating. They tended to just eat one cookie and go, well, I've already blown my diet.
Right.
We've all had those. That sort of mentality.
100%. Right? I've been to that place where you have one bite of bad food and you're thinking,
screw it.
And you binge.
Exactly.
And I know a lot of you guys out there know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. Not even the people that compete, the people that start off the new year, and I always cringe when this happens. They start off the new year and they say, Steve, you know, I'm doing great. I'm eating my ground turkey 3 times a day. I'm eating my asparagus. And I just cringe because I know it's not sustainable.
Yes.
2 or 3 weeks, what's going to happen? You're going to be with your friends. You're going to want that pizza. You're going to have a bite of that pizza. And all of a sudden, that entire day is wasted now. You're going to go out, you're going to have ice cream, and you're just going to binge eat. And I was in that same situation when I first started. Really, like I am a perfectionist. I'm a person that if I see a little results, I'm going to do more and more and more, to the point where I was binge eating. I was working at a restaurant and I would binge eat in the back because And really it was about what is eating you, not what are you eating, what was eating you. I had things going on in my life that I had probably no business restricting calories and trying to get super lean for a show. But it was that mentality, Steve, you got to be better. You got to be better. You got to be better. And beating yourself up for that. And I think that what has always resonated with me about what Layne does is it gives you that freedom to choose things. Like yesterday, I had a high carb day. I had a Lenny's and Larry cookie. And I just remember people at the gym kind of giving me a hard time about it yesterday. They were saying, I thought you were prepping for a show. And I just had to stop. And I'm like, yeah, like I can eat this and get lean. And they're like, oh, you're lucky you can do that. Oh. You must have the best genetics out there that you can get lean for a show eating cookies. And it's just like, you're not getting it. I don't eat cookies for every meal. Right. I don't want to do that. I want to feel good. And yeah, I think for me, I've been to the, we all know how we feel when we binge eat and we get way too much sugar, and you're sweating, you can't sleep at night because your heart's racing because it's about the overall calories that you're taking in, the overall amount of insulin that now is in your bloodstream because you've just eaten tons and tons of sugar past that.
Changing the mindset of somebody, right? So cheat versus healthy or good foods, right? When people ask me like, how often do you have cheat meals? I'm like, I don't have cheat meals, right? Because if I fit it into my numbers for a day, it's not a cheat. I don't have anything. There's nothing to feel guilty about because cheat implies guilt. And it's so funny you bring up the sustainability thing. Sustainability is huge, even for competitors, because if you're able to get shredded, but then you blow up 30, 40, 50 pounds in the off season,
that was me.
It's going to be so much harder to get back down there. What if you were able to stay like you do now? You're 10, 15 pounds out of contest shape, way easier to get back into shape, right? Because you know how to track and you know how to incorporate these foods to where it's not going off the rails when it happens, right?
And I think that brings up a good point that again, the sustainability. How would you, because as a perfectionist, I'm a person that I love trying to get right on my macros. Now, in any food label we know there's about a 20%, error that they can kind of work within. But how, in the off season, because for me, keeping that detailed, weighing out everything, that's what gets monotonous. That's what gets tedious. How do you kind of, and for me, it's been about letting go of being that perfectionist, knowing that, I've counted macros long enough that I know that slice of pizza, probably I'm going to find something typically that is roughly that amount, and knowing that I'm not going to be perfect, but knowing that I've at least entered it or I've at least accounted for those macros. And while it might not be perfect, it's much better. And we have to understand this as adults. It's much different than eating a whole piece of pizza than a slice. Like there is, and I think that kind of portion control goes out the window when you start thinking of things as good or bad. You've had one slice of pizza, so now you're ruined for the day. Yeah. And that's where we're adults. We know that's not the same thing. So by just keeping that accountability and just even entering it subconsciously allows us to feel like we're still being accountable to something. We're still being accountable to our program, our health, and that's us. And you're still able to eat those things. But I wanted to ask you, after Australia, so after my show in Hawaii, I'll be heading down to Australia. I want to enjoy the food.
Sure, of course. Good food there.
How do you, without taking a food scale to a restaurant, traveling so much, how do you generally get that?
And I always tell people, the level of, if you are going to track more loosely, you may have times where you add a little bit more body fat. And so it's all about a trade-off, right? If somebody I don't judge people's value. So if somebody says, hey man, I want to be shredded year round, this and that, well, then you're probably going to have to do the thing where you take a food scale to a restaurant, you're making some sort of sacrifice in exchange for that goal, right? But if you say, hey, I'd like to maintain a little bit more of my leanness, but I don't want to be taking a food scale everywhere, this and that. Well, then there's I like to say mindful eating, which is exactly what you described, right? So you're saying, you know what? And I do think it is important for people who have never done flexible dieting before to take a food scale everywhere. To do that for a few weeks.
Always.
And understand, because you'll understand actually what is in food.
Portion control.
You will understand. You will understand, that a tablespoon of peanut butter ain't that big. You know what I mean? It's about this big.
I always love that when people are like, I can't seem to either gain weight or lose weight. Well, what are your calories at? What are your macros at? Oh, I don't know. I don't eat. But unless you truly weigh things out, and I think this is kind of across the board, I can't speak for CrossFitters. I actually did get my CrossFit cert, and they talked about this, where they'll count macros. Even CrossFitters know what they're eating. Like they're not just, you always see these like Rich Froning posts where he's eating peanut butter and bacon and this and nonstop. Most people out there I can't speak for Rich Froning, but in that CrossFit class, they were even talking about tracking macros for 2 to 3 weeks. And what that does is give you an idea of what portion control is like.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden, you're able to kind of visually just say, yeah, okay, that's about a cup of rice. Last night I was out to eat. I got some sushi. I had sashimi, and then I had a cup of rice. And I was able to more or less just say, hey, I had about 9 ounces of sushi, and I had about a cup of rice. Now,
but you've only been able to do that from taking the scale and doing that and knowing, okay, that weighs about that. If you've never done it, you try to throw yourself. So you have to give yourself those tools.
100%.
Right? And then you're going to be better off when you get done with your show, or you get done with your diet, or you want to be a little bit more relaxed, that you can do that and estimate, right? And estimate those things. And I go on travel all the time, and I don't take a food scale with me. I did a 3-week tour of Australia last year. I didn't take a food scale with me. I actually lost a pound while I was there.
Really?
And I was eating out 3 meals a day. So you just...
That's the goal right there, is to be able to just know. And I think, again, when it comes back to about health, I'm getting on stage, which is all about looks. I'm not going to make any qualms about it. Getting on stage is solely about looks. But what I've really realized, and we were talking about this yesterday, is after your show, you need to have a different goal, which is no longer about looks. That's a very vain outward expression of it's not even real health. So it has nothing to do with, we misjudge the exterior on how healthy a person is necessarily, because I've seen people that are ridiculously shredded but are smoking to curb their appetite. That's not healthy. But I think the main thing here that I when you have macros, think of it like, and I always tell people this, think of it like you have a bank account. And each day, you start off with, let's say $2,800, 2,800 calories, same type of a thing. And I want to use those as wisely as possible. If I go out and blow my load for breakfast, and then I just know I'm going to be a little bit hungrier. But what that has allowed me to do is I only eat really now when I'm hungry. And I typically, you kind of get on a schedule when you're training and everything. I make sure most of my carbs are pre and post workout. But I know if I wake up in the morning and I'm not that hungry, guess what? My breakfast is going to be a little bit lower. Today I had approximately 27 grams carbs in my oats, but I know that I'm gonna have a big pre-workout meal because I got leg day today, so I want to be fueled for that. And all of a sudden, it really you're no longer obsessing about your next meal. You're no longer thinking, okay, I'm eating the exact same thing at the exact same time each and every day, because all of a sudden I literally forgot how to eat just when I'm hungry, and that that's just a basic biological principle. But when you do it smart, you're able to stay in shape. And I think that's, especially for girls out there that you say that. I see so many girls that it's not cool to blow up after a show. For guys, it's always, hey, we're bulking. It's bulking season. Yeah,
guys can do that. I've only seen probably very few girls that say I'm bulking.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's the budget analogy is what I always use. So, and I'll kind of end on this because I think it helps make the point for people, right? So because people go, you can't tell me that Pop-Tart's better for you than a sweet potato. And what I'll say is, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Pop-Tart keeps you from binge eating because you were able to satisfy that craving, then it was better than a sweet potato. Okay?
100%.
Because you can overeat unhealthy foods too. It's a little bit harder because they tend to have more fiber. But if we look at a budget, right, and let's say you make $100,000 a year, right? And, is it smart for you to go out and cash buy an $80,000 car if you're not able to pay your mortgage and you're not able to put retirement away and you're not able to pay for your utilities and those sorts of things? Well, of course not, right? But if you make $1 million a year and you can buy that $80,000 sports car and you can still pay your mortgage, you still put money away for retirement, you still take care of your responsibilities, then it's fine, right? And so I look at it just like that, right? So your Pop-Tart or your sweets or whatever it is, calorically dense things, that's sports car, right? If you've got a fast metabolism and you can diet on a lot of calories, you can afford to do those sorts of things because you're still going to hit your fiber, you're still going to hit your protein, you're still going to hit your numbers. But if you are trying to do that on a poverty macro budget, it's not going to happen. I mean, if you've got people down to 100 grams of carbs a day or under 100 grams of carbs a day, they're just not going to be able to do sweets by default.
You got to pinch those quote-unquote pennies and make that last.
You brought up sustainability earlier, and I think that's one of the major parts of dieting. People don't think about that. They just think about, this 12-week diet. They don't think about what happens after the diet, right? Sustainability, my friend Sohi, she said, if the diet you're on, you can't see yourself being able to diet that way in 3 months, 6 months, a year, you got to rethink your plan.
I love that.
Because it's not going to work, right? You're going to regain all that weight. And I have people, they say they're going to eat clean. They say they're going to do that. Can you really do that for that long? Can you really just never have bread again or never have anything? Like, of course and I get people who, like, as they're shoveling food down their face, as they're having that cheat meal and like shoveling, this is the last cheat meal I'll never have. No, of course it's not the last cheat meal.
Diet starts tomorrow, diet starts Monday. And
of course you're going to do it again, So
I love
why not
that.
accommodate for it? Like, why not allow yourself some flexibility?
If you can't stay on the diet you are currently on and it's not sustainable, you shouldn't be doing it. And I think what that really lends itself to is you're not dieting. That word dieting, to me, just means I'm restricting calories. I'm not changing the foods I eat. I'm restricting calories. I'm not eating any cleaner. Like, and we've talked about, once my prep's over, I'll be increasing the fats and I'll be doing like maybe a sprint triathlon. So I'm eating for my goals. It's going to be very different than my bodybuilding, my men's physique macros. And I'll say this, the last thing to kind of wrap it up, we're talking about more or less people that lift weights, that are active. My dad, for example, he saw how I actually, after I got divorced a couple years ago, 6 years ago, moved back in with them when I was prepping with Layne, and he saw the way I would eat and inspired him to lose weight. Now that I don't live at home, he looks great and he's doing great things. He's always looking. He's like me. I get this from him. He's always looking to cut out sugar, or cut out this or that. And I think that even for the everyday person out there, you need to sit down, recognize what it is that you love. Some people love the sweet, and it's about not necessarily saying no to those things and then beating yourself up. Being a biology psychology major, I really realized it was cool because I got the biology classes, but also the psychology of why we do things. Why is it that when you tell yourself no on that cookie,
first thing you was
the group that looks at you can take a cookie or you shouldn't. That group that says I shouldn't, guess what? All they can think about is that cookie. And that's exactly what happens to us when we only eat certain foods. All of a sudden, when things are taboo, you naturally want to gravitate and try those things. So when you're prepping, and so many bodybuilders and athletes out there, and thankfully to Layne, things are changing or have changed, because it used to be like a badge of honor to eat tilapia and asparagus and rice every single day, and people would think I could only prep on that. Now it's not the case, and I think you're getting healthier competitors out there. There's always going to be things that that some people say, oh, I can't prep on that, or I can't use that. If you're allergic to milk, let's say, if you're lactose intolerant, obviously those are types of things. But we're really looking at, in this prep, I haven't even felt like I've really, it hasn't gotten hard for me until about a week ago. And that was due just to, we've had to cut back calories, overall general intake. But the refeed days, I think, are important. But this video is really more or less just what is flexible dieting, and I think we really dispelled the myth that it's not always eating junk food. It's not eating Twinkies every day. You're gonna make smarter decisions because you learn how to budget.
Exactly. And if I could give one piece of advice out there, there's misinformation on both sides. People who flexible diet, they only post their junk food that they're eating, And if you're only eating junk food, you're not going to hit your macros. That's the most important point.
Especially your fats. Your fats go so quick if you're eating junk food.
And it's unfortunately there's a lot of misconceptions and but if you don't track, it's like saying, and I'll end on this. It's like saying, I want to get rich, but I'm not willing to budget. Right. So if you don't track your macros, if you don't know what they are, you will believe that there's magic foods because you go, oh, when I dropped out all my pasta, or I dropped out all my starches, I got leaner. Right. Well, you dropped out all your starches and you cut out 400 calories.
Huge carbohydrate.
Or I switched from steak to fish, and I lost 2 pounds. Well, you cut out 600 calories. Right. It wasn't that that's magic. It's just that you dropped your calories. Right. So
that's such a good point. I think we'll do maybe another video where we talk on are there foods out there that better regulate your hormones? Or are there and really we'll talk a little bit more about that science. But I think this video, if you guys liked it, check out Layne's channel. Go over and subscribe to him. Follow him on all his social medias. Bio Layne. And leave your questions or anything for him in this, or go over to his page and comment. We're gonna be doing some more videos over there. But thanks for checking it out, guys.